Hello, and thank you for choosing to watch a New Life video. We're continuing our study based on the people mentioned in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11. We're still talking about Jacob. We are going to be picking up at Genesis chapter 28, verse 10. What had happened in the last time Jacob managed to trick his father into giving him the blessing that he'd intended for Esau, and now Jacob is leaving so that his brother Esau doesn't kill him.
Yeah.
So, verse 10 says, "Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there all night, because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep." I don't think I could sleep if my head was on a stone. I like a nice fluffy pillow myself. You know? Then he dreamed, verse 12, "And behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east, to the north and the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back into this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you." That's quite a promise.
Mm-hmm. Very definitely.
Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And a lot of times we can look in our lives, things that happened, and realize much later that the Lord was in it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes things that we think were bad end up being something that is for the good. You know, the Bible says that all things work together for good to those that love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. Not necessarily all things are good, but they all will work together for the good. So Jacob was in this place. He went to bed. He did not know the Lord was with him, and then he found out. And that's quite a promise for him to hold on to. Verse 17, "And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Then Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel. The name of the city had been Luz previously. So Bethel means house of God. So, as he said, this is the house of God, so he called it that. A lot of times in the Old Testament they will name things based on what happens there. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and keep me in the way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace." You may remember what I said a few minutes ago. He didn't leave in peace. When he left, his brother was planning to kill him. His brother kept telling himself, as soon as Dad dies, I'm going to kill my brother. That was literally what he comforted himself with. So, "Then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you." So he's making promises. If God does all this, how many people have done that? They've been in a bad situation, and, okay, God, if you do this,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
then I'll do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
truth is, whether we're in a tight spot or not, we're supposed to give God our lives. We're supposed to live for Him every day, when we're in good times or bad times. Not just as a bargaining chip. Okay, it's like if you owe someone money, and you say, okay, if you'll do this, 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 then I'll give you what I owed you before anything.
Yeah.
That's just an interesting observation I've made about those kind of promises. Usually it's people promising things that they felt they already ought to have done anyway. But Jacob is scared. That's why he's running away. Fortunately, he's running to someplace as well. Sometimes people just run away and don't know where they're going, and who knows where they'll end up. But he was going to his mother's family. So, chapter 29. So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked and saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. So, sometimes we have trouble remembering. Back then, if you wanted water, you didn't just walk up to the sink and turn the knob. Getting water out of a well, even without that stone, was hard work. Just pulling a rope or something. And this large stone, it would have to be a heavy one because that was the whole point of it. So no one could come around and mess up the well. In Isaac's life, they came to different wells that had been stopped up. So this stone was on that well so that it wouldn't get stopped up. Or just totally drained by some stranger who just passes through, takes all the water they can get out of that well until it's dry and leaves. Wouldn't want that to happen either. Now, all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, "My brethren, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." Then he said to them, "Do you know Laban the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." So good, he's got someone who knows his uncle. So he said to them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." Then he said, "Look, it is still high day. It is not time for cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks gather together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep." Now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Normally they had to wait until someone who was able to do that would come and roll the stone. But Jacob went and did it once he saw Rachel. And watered the flock from Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him for a month. So he found his family, his mother's brother and his family. So verse 15, after Jacob had stayed there a month, then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing?" Which would probably imply that he'd already started helping him out during that month. But tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So, as was the tradition in those days, an arrangement was made. And he would work 7 years to marry Rachel. So, verse 20. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid, and it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. So, I don't know if they got him drunk. I know they didn't have lights.
Yeah.
So he goes to this whole marriage ceremony, and in the morning he wakes up, it's nice and light, and he looks next to him, and
Uh-oh.
you know. Yeah. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? Of course, I would say one thing. Jacob himself had been a deceiver. He had tricked his father into the blessing. He had gotten his brother to sell his birthright for a bowl of pottage. Yeah. Sometimes what goes around comes around, but this is kind of dirty, I would say. This is really bad. But anyway, he's upset. Not surprisingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So basically a week later he got to marry Rachel and owed another 7 years of work.
Oh, so that's how it worked.
Yeah, I used to
Okay.
think that he actually had to work another 7 years before he got Rachel.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
yeah. But
okay.
in studying it, that's actually what happened.
Oh,
It's just-
okay. Thank you.
So Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and so he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also, and Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. What a surprise!
Yeah.
The one that he wanted, he likes better. I mean,
Yeah.
why is Leah surprised?
Yeah.
You know, they talk about her like a victim, but she was part of this too.
Yeah.
She should have full well known when her father said, hey, I want you to
Yeah.
put on this veil during the marriage ceremony. So
Yeah, really.
Yeah. No. But, so, yeah, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, this is the interesting thing about the Lord. He sees this and doesn't really blame Leah that much. I think she does have some guilt there.
Yeah.
But the Lord saw that Leah was unloved. He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son. She called his name Reuben. Reuben, for she said, the Lord has surely looked upon my affliction. So this is, okay. Behold, a son is apparently what that word means. Now therefore my husband will love me. So she thought, okay, I had a kid, now he's going to love me.
I don't think it works that way. But
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But that's what she was hoping.
Oh, yeah.
Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And, let's see, Simeon. Literally, it means heard. That's the word that the name Simeon means. She conceived again and bore a son. Tell you one thing, she's really having the
she's
kids.
fertile.
Yeah. Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi, which means attached. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, which means praise. Then she stopped bearing. So what is happening? Perhaps you recognize these names. The tribes of Israel are starting to begin. And we're in chapter 30. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said to Jacob, give me children, or else I die. Not to get inappropriate, but I'm sure he was doing his best.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and verse 2, and Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel for saying this, yelling like, give me children. You know?
Yeah.
And he said, am I in the place of God?
Yeah.
You know. Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, here's my maid Bilhah, go in to her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I may have a child by her. I may have children through her, by her. So she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as wife, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Yeah, a surrogate mother, basically. And Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan, which means judge. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali, which means my wrestling. You know, by the way, this probably isn't the best way for those sisters to get along, to be married to the same guy.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah.
probably not very good for their relationship.
Right.
When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad, which means troop. Yeah, so far she's given her four boys naturally, and then another one as a surrogate. It's really getting to be a troop.
Yeah, that's true. Getting to be all right.
And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher, which means happy. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, which were believed to help with fertility. They actually were. And brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Sounds bitterness. Sounds like bitterness.
Oh, yeah.
And Leah saying, you took away my husband. Perhaps her memory is a little foggy. It's been some years, I'd say, since then, but he was supposed to marry Rachel in the first place.
Right.
You know? she stole Rachel's husband. But, and Rachel said, "Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I've surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, "God has given me my wages, because I have given my maid to my husband." So she called his name Issachar, which means wages. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons." And she called his name Zebulun, which means dwelling. Afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, "God has taken away my reproach." Because in those days, that was a big part of a woman's value, was that she had children. Well, that's fair or not is not what I'm saying. That's how it was. So God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, which means he will add, and said, "The Lord shall add to me another son." And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go. For you know my service which I have done for you." And Laban said to him, "Please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake." Then he said, "Name me your wages, and I will give it." So Laban has noticed that while Jacob has been working there, that they've been blessed. You know, his cattle has increased a lot, and whatever other ways that it was measurable. But so he wanted Jacob to stay there. So Jacob said to him, "You know how I have served you, and how your livestock has been with me, for what you had before I came was little, but it has increased to a great amount, and the Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now when shall I also provide for my own house?" So he said, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "You will not give me anything, if you will do this thing for me. I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the lambs, will be considered stolen, if it is with me." So he's making an arrangement of which particular animals will be his, but he wanted to get his own herd. And Laban said, "Oh, that it were according to your word." So he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So there's a big distance between the two herds, so that none of them are going to accidentally wander in. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips on them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, where the flocks come to drink, so that they should conceive when they come to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs, and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban, but he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels, and donkeys. So basically what's happened is that that Jacob is getting more more cattle than Laban out of this deal. And we're just about out of time, so this is where we'll stop. But what do you learn from this? One thing is that God has been taking care of Jacob. He has. He's been fulfilling his promise and being blessed, and almost all the tribes of Israel have been born at this point, all of the patriarchs of those tribes.
Mm-hmm.
There's one who's still left, and that'll be later. But Jacob has done deceiving in the past. Now he's been deceived in some ways, and you'll find out later that other ways too. But so he did in that sense reap what he sowed. But God is with him anyway, and he is prospering. So what do you think will be happening in the next chapter? As Jacob is gaining more cattle than Laban. Some jealousies will start there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'd say that Jacob deserves that cattle and the increase in sheep and so on, because he was cheated out of 7 years of the wife he wanted.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, absolutely. But envy and jealousy doesn't necessarily need to make sense.
true.
You see
true.
something you want,
Yeah.
you want it. It doesn't matter how that person got it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if an angel personally came down to Jacob in front of them all, carrying the cow. Here, God said this is yours. He'd still be jealous. You know?
Yeah.
But God is taking care of Jacob, and he's prospering. But there are going to be some problems that will be in the next lesson. That other thing to remember is to trust God through everything, good and bad. Just keep trusting God. You keep doing what God wants you to do, and he'll work out the rest. And the hard part is trusting that God will work out the rest. I hope this has been a blessing. If it has, please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time, go with God.